the haunted lair. Good, they're finally gonna do this after that one gag where he thought the lair was haunted. I'm excited. I miss the sci-fi fantasy elements in Sonic. Wait, I just had a horrifying thought. What if the plot twist is that the lair isn't haunted? This is supposed to be a sci-fi fantasy series, so the existence of ghosts shouldn't be out of the question. They should be embracing the unrealistic and fantastical, not shunning it out of embarrassment. I'm under the assumption that there really will be a ghost, but if there isn't, I'll be pissed. Because this is Sonic, not Seinfeld. I want to be reminded why I like this series. We start out with everyone lining up, and Barker tells them to pay him for a chance to see the haunted forest. Why do people need to pay to see it? He just builds a gate outside so that they have to pay him to get past it. That's clearly a scam. Wouldn't anybody be able to reach the forest from any side? They could ask Tails to fly them there. Is it surrounded by mountainous walls at all sides? After a horrible and confusing joke where Styx screams at the idea of government-mandated healthcare, when you'd think someone paranoid would want the government to have to pay for stuff more out of spite, Eggman snarks at how people are scared of fake stuff, and then he thinks that fake ghost is real and panics. Then Tails scares Eggman, but fortunately he says this is sad. Sonic complains that he was made to feel guilty, and fortunately looks sad as well. He then tells Eggman that he wants to prove there's no ghosts. This is the Sonic series! There were ghosts in Sandopolis! Way to flip off the classic fans, make the majority of your big fans. Sonic takes Eggman to Barker, who tells him that his ghosts were fake, because cliché, generic comedy show. And Eggman says that the numbness in his left arm is probably nothing. And then we cut away, instead of Sonic just telling him to go to the hospital. Is he just that much of an anti-hero that he's hoping he'll get a heart attack? Then Eggman panics that there's a real ghost. And Barker is somehow happy when he says that the reason this happened was because he built the lair on the smallest of Gogobuff burial grounds. Wait, so then why did it take this long for Eggman's base to be haunted if it was always built on a burial ground? So Eggman makes a deal with Barker. I don't get it. Why does he think Barker could protect him from a ghost? It's not like Barker offered him ghost hunting equipment. Why don't ghosts take down Eggman? They're invincible. Eggman wakes up Sonic by hitting a building with a little hammer and reveals that he has to make a new house because his own lair is haunted. Wow, he sure built that whole building fast. I mean, it looks like he's the only one working on it. Barker then advertises Eggman's base as a haunted lair. Sonic says that Barker conned him and was just looking for a better attraction. This better not lead to a revelation that the ghost isn't real. While this explains why Eggman doesn't get killed by ghosts, there were ghosts in Sandopolis. Sonic tells Eggman that there was a digital projection of a ghost. So Eggman demands his lair back from Barker after that boring and anticlimactic and underwhelming plot twist. When Eggman tells everyone that there's no ghost and he gets thrown into the ocean by a giant robot, miraculously everyone actually believes him, and Barker loses all his business. Also, it sure was miraculous that Eggman didn't land in the ocean, and instead landed on the ground we didn't see, perfectly safe, and survived the fall. He must have had rings. How does he collect rings when he's not going through zones? Well, maybe the rings are in the village itself, because Sonic never goes through zones in this show, just the village. And obviously the rings are invisible, just like they are in almost every continuity of Sonic, unless we need to see them. Because otherwise, the whole franchise would fall apart from logic. Then Barker goes after Sonic in the Eggmobile. It was entertaining to hear his hammy, sophisticated dialogue where he said the word demise. But then he just sends motobugs after the heroes. You know, in the games, the boss was always the Eggmobile, and it was a different variation on every time, which was way more creative. Wouldn't that be way more intimidating and interesting than the heroes just fighting badniks, which you do every time you go through the regular levels? The heroes have to duck and cover when the flying robots start dropping stuff. It's not like they're ducking under a table. Wouldn't this just make them sitting ducks because they aren't doing anything to dodge and aren't looking up to see where they're coming from? Sonic then asks to say, let's try it again, after I wonder how the heroes weren't killed. Eggman's communication with Orbot and Cubot somehow doesn't wake up Barker's sleeping goons, and they're told to install the virus. But why? It's very stupid that the heroes are just standing there doing nothing when the robots are circling them, when Sonic should just be attacking them all no problem. All to force Eggman to be the one to save them, because the robots shoot at Barker with lasers and send him out of the Eggmobile. Eggman then says he'll take the Lair off his hands, because once he's their master, he'll be off the hook. So how will he undo the anti-allegiance virus right after this? I mean, immediately all of the robots are going after him. Instead, heroic music plays with no proof that they decide to attack him, and the story ends with robots going after Sonic. And the action scene doesn't get finished. I guess Eggman lied and the virus is only meant to make them hate Barker, not Eggman. But why didn't he just say that? Barker wouldn't be able to get rid of a virus or reprogram it, and Eggman would. You know, it's pretty embarrassing for an episode when you immediately predict what the shitty twist is going to be that'll disappoint you. You immediately predict it out of sheer cynicism, and they prove you right. Don't name an episode The Haunted Lair if it's not actually haunted. That's like naming an episode Pizza when there's no pizza. I thought this would be written to finally show us a story where he does ghost busting after that one gag where Sonic threw stuff when he was invisible, and Eggman thought there was a ghost. Nope. Why would I ever believe they would take inspiration from the previous episodes? That would require the writer to watch the previous episodes. It's just a digital projection. Well, that does fill in the plot holes I pointed out regarding the ghosts, though. I was wondering why Ghost hadn't taken down Eggman, although he could make ghost vacuums, I'm sure, so that's easy to explain away, actually. So that's not really a big plot hole. And I was wondering why it took so long for the Lair to be haunted if its location was the problem. Also, it's completely bonkers that anyone would willingly visit a haunted forest, let alone a haunted lair. How did Barker even have any customers? Those are the bravest people ever. Well, they have to be if they're fine with bullying Sonic and Eggman so much. Anyways, this episode sucked. Big surprise. It's unacceptable to portray the existence of Ghost and Sonic as inherently laughably stupid from the start in a series that has Sandopoulos Zone in it. Not to mention Pumpkin Hill and Pyramid Cave from SA2. Wait, why didn't Maria come back as a ghost? That'd be convenient for Shadow, so that must be why. While the music did a great job making things dramatic when Barker replaced Eggman, ultimately the heroes were just wimpified to force the tension in the saddest way. Because they weren't really in more danger. They just stood there while robots circled them when all these robots just die in one hit. And we saw Sonic take out all the robots in an action scene one time, so why isn't he just doing that again? The robots weren't being any more competent other than dropping stuff from the sky, which Eggman should have made them do way earlier, and always do from now on. And yet even then, they don't hit the heroes. Plus, Tails can fly. He should have just flown up to them and kicked them all to death. And Sonic has the Sonic X jump in the show, so it'd be no threat to him either. It makes sense if Barker explained that he was dosing the heroes with a gas that brainwashed them to be cowardly. Like how Chaos scared the hell out of the heroes in Fleetway because of a magical ability it had. I was impressed with Barker's intelligence for having this plan and making a whole haunted forest attraction. But it's obvious that the writer has no familiarity with the actual Sonic franchise. So this was just shameful and embarrassing. At least in the Muckfoot episode, they had the guts to reveal that Muckfoot was real in the end, which remembers what genre this is. Sonic the Comic had plenty of ghosts, and they made the plots way more interesting. I should have known a long time ago that the show wouldn't have the common sense and kindness to be true to the title of the episode. I was looking forward to this for a long time. Why did they have an episode title that fucking lied to us? It's just underwhelming and anticlimactic and boring, when we were looking forward to seeing how they deal with the ghosts. So what if ghosts aren't realistic? Sonic's not realistic. The writers need to get in their head that this isn't taking place in the real world. Return of the Buddy Buddy Temple of Doom. Well, I'm excited. They're officially running out of episode ideas, so they're reusing this place. Tails should have destroyed this place for the island's safety. And what traps could they have possibly missed? Wouldn't it just be the same plot events again? We start out with Sonic facing Charlie, and he finally does a spin dash on the ground for once. And he moves around the mecha and makes it fall over with the wind. So why didn't he simply run around him? What's the point of doing a spin dash if you aren't going to slice through anything? I guess his mecha is made out of such tough materials that it's impossible for Sonic to damage and destroy it with a spin dash. Eggman complains jealously that while he could beat Charlie with a third of his robot army, he wouldn't be praised as a hero if he did it. He decides to show off how fragile the resistance is. Sonic says that's dark. And then Eggman uncharacteristically apologizes and says he hasn't had his morning coffee yet, and says a stupid word after cranky. They really do have no idea how to handle this character. When he first complained all jealous of Sonic, I thought this was going to lead to a subplot where Eggman tried to be a hero by fighting the Lightning Bolt Society, so that he could get people to like him. He did that in the Sonic X comic. His giant robot immediately runs out of batteries because all those features were using too much juice. Orbot suggests removing features, and he actually had an amusing quip when he suggested, "May I suggest removing your head?" I guess part of why it was amusing was because Orbot said something Captain Obvious. Amy goes to comfort Eggman for some reason, and Tails finally lampshades that their dynamic with Eggman is very confusing. But sadly, after Sonic somehow disagrees, because this is all he's ever known, and the writer insists on saying anthropomorphic again when no one would say that needlessly long word instead of Mobian, which any fanfiction writer uses. The conversation ends there, so we can get our time wasted by Amy. Well, at least she had the self-awareness to say that helping Eggman isn't in her best interest. She said that in such a relatable way. Charlie tells Eggman about a convenient tea crystal buried below the Buddy Buddy Temple, which, how did anyone know about it? I'm assuming it's called Tunnel Crystal. Eggman screams in fear at seeing the Og Army, and then our time is painfully wasted by both of them screaming for way too long. For no reason at all, the Og Army bows to him, and one of them begs him to spare their worthless lives. His words. It actually makes sense because Eggman has an Eggmobile, which is a deadly weapon with lasers. Of course they'd be scared and bow to him. And they don't know the heroes are around, which has to be the only reason that every villager isn't like this, because they know that despite anything Eggman could do to them, Sonic would just get their revenge for him. Why did he scream with his arms in the air after they screamed again, when they clearly just agreed to do his busy work? Sonic gets lost on his own island, and they wander over to the Guilt Tripper village. They've been here before, so how did they get here by being lost? But the leader is apparently the only one there, because all the others were kidnapped by Froglodytes. The leader knows the name of those guys? Anyways, as I wonder why the leader was the only one who wasn't sent to work in the mines, I also wonder why it isn't the Froglodytes themselves who worked in the mines. One of them says that they're making the slaves do this because the hammers are heavy. I love how furious the slave driver gets at how annoying the whiners are. It's really cathartic. Those Gokubas can't do anything! I guess the Froglodytes don't have whips. Realistically, these guys would be suffering a lot more than this. Eggman says that someone's gonna dig up his crystal, and it's gonna be them or him. I love that intimidating line for once, and how he actually agreed. It showed me the shadow of how Eggman is supposed to be before I remembered what show I was watching. Sonic sadly agrees to save them thanks to Amy prodding him. She's his morality chain. I'm really confused that the slavery even started. I thought they didn't even know the Guilt Trippers existed. They live underground. They fan Eggman underground, and the heroes spy on Eggman, and Tails immediately sets off a booby trap that traps them all in a net. Eggman one-ups them for once because he enslaves the heroes, as they're all chained together. And Amy tells him to be careful with her hammer. Impressively, Eggman actually gets the tea crystal. Amy then thinks of reverse psychology, and Sonic satisfyingly says that he always wants to do the opposite of what she tells him to. Infuriatingly, he's written to say that that's more his problem than hers, showing self-awareness he'd never show, revealing that the writer somehow prefers Amy because he thinks it's a problem that you wouldn't want to be like Amy. Amy gets her hammer back by manipulation, simply asking for it. Somehow, the Ogs turn on Eggman because they somehow decide that Eggman's not a magical flying monster and is just like them. How is he just like them? He still has an Eggmobile that can kill them with lasers. Wouldn't it make more sense if he just fired at them with lasers and they decide to obey him anyways? Then Sonic actually gets into a mecha and has an extended fight with the giant robot. Why can't it be Tails doing this? He's about technology. But he's just doing melee attacks with it. So in spite of the epic rock music, it's actually pretty boring to watch. Even the spin dash is more interesting to look at. Eggman orders missiles to be fired and uses a tractor beam to drag Sonic over to him. He says goodbye, but somehow an explosion sends him away from him in a confusing Deus Ex Machina. And Eggman can't even have the power to self-destruct his robot and beat Sonic with it, because of all the features. So it ran out of juice before it could pull an Archie Antoine on us. Sonic tells the Og Army that they have to stop bowing to false kings and think for themselves. And they don't listen. And because this is Boom Sonic, I actually expected him to cut to the next scene with them as a slave army. But instead, he actually does stick with this uncharacteristically moral speech of his. So, did their own king die? Because otherwise, wouldn't they have their own leader? He must have died without an heir if he's not getting really jealous of Eggman. It's such a missed opportunity that Eggman isn't just gonna keep this army of Froglodytes on his side for the entire show. I assumed they sided with him out of fear of his Eggmobile, not because they think he's a monster who can fly. And they clearly are familiar with technology in some aspect, because they were able to operate his drill machines to escape the underground just fine. So I didn't get the impression that they had no familiarity with technology. But either way, they had the same reason to do what he said, whether he's a monster or not. Fear of his Eggmobile. Not to mention his other robots. But no, they randomly stopped working for him because Eggman can't have anything. This really looked like an idea that it would make sense for it to continue past this episode. This is why it sucks to have something be episodic. It just wastes great ideas. Also, I have to assume that the T-Crystal has a finite amount of energy, and thus ran out of power because of the giant robot. And there's a forced joke at the end, because Tails says they need an end joke, and for no reason some pies fall on his head out of nowhere, which makes no sense and wasn't funny. It felt like a Deus Ex Machina that Charlie somehow knew about the T-Crystal just so Eggman could go looking for it. But since he's an archaeologist, I guess it makes sense that he would have learned about ancient crystal, because he would research the murals in history. I guess after it was infused with energy by the ancients, the people around it all died before they could use it all up. And that has to be the case for every power crystal. Wouldn't it have made more sense if the crystal just had that power from the beginning of the formation because they're magic crystals? That'd keep things simple. Although I do love the idea that there's a finite amount of magical energy in the crystals. Like, they could have done that in Archie with all those different Chaos Emeralds. They could have the heroes use that finite amount of energy for portable deroboticizers. And it would balance things out because it only has so much energy. So you have to keep looking for more emeralds. Anyways, it felt like this episode didn't have an action scene. All of Sonic's attacks with the mecha felt barely noticeable and memorable, because they're just melee attacks in a mecha, and we've seen melee attacks 1,000 times before. It would have been much cooler if it was Tails doing this. It was impressive when Eggman used tractor beams to pull him towards him, but then he randomly lost to a Deus Ex Machina. I mean, if it was his robot malfunctioning, why did it take so long? It was convenient that it happened then of all times. And it was very baffling that they named the episode after the Buddy Buddy Temple, when no part of the episode involved returning to that temple. The crystal could have been buried under anything. With this combined with the Haunted Lair episode, are they just misnaming the episodes on purpose to mislead people? But it does make sense because, again, we've seen all the temple already. But then they should have just named the episode Return of the Froglodytes. The lazy Froglodytes who apparently don't just do the mining themselves. Although I'm impressed that they return for a third episode. If they're at the point where they can escape from underground whenever they want just to kidnap some Gogabas, then first of all, they're officially not trapped anymore. What's keeping them from escaping every chance they get and trying to take over both towns? Why did they even know about the Gogabas? Eggman would have told them to go mine. They create a big problem by having them able to escape whenever they want, when their entire identity was that they were trapped. But no, let's not explain that. Also, it immediately struck me as a missed opportunity that the Mecha Sonic used wasn't another mecha that corrupted him, making him evil, but it'd only be used for a forgettable action scene, so it wouldn't have mattered. It was surprisingly dark at points with how close Eggman got to winning, and how he actually got in a position of genuine power. Sure, he has robots, but they're all mindless aside from Orbot and Cubot, the two measly robots with speaking roles who are constantly with them. Even though he has power over all of his robots, it's not like he's an actual tyrant, because they don't have lives for him to govern. For once, he felt like the tyrant he's supposed to be, a fundamental missing piece of Robotnik's character. But no, let's not go with that idea, even though Eggman should be able to take over the town easily by threatening them with robots, all because Amy somehow manipulates someone who's meant to keep her hammer into giving her the hammer he needs to use, because Mary's suit powers activate. Couldn't Sonic have just punched him and gotten it back that way? Sonic is an action series, not a talking series. But I guess the show that's all about dialogue-based jokes really does think it's a talking series. Sonic doesn't live with them, so he can't defend them. He'd have no reason to be conveniently right there to stop him from taking over their town. And the same can be said about the Gokuba town. The heroes can only be in so many places at once. It's not like the status quo has to change that much if they just let him take this place over already. He'd still be trying the same plans against Sonic. He could just have an extra army somewhere. Actually, if he thought that governing them was taking up too much of his time that could be spent towards fighting Sonic, it might make sense that he would give up on ruling them on his own, so we should have just seen that. Boom Eggman would probably be the kind of person who would quickly get bored with it when he still hasn't fulfilled his long-time goal of destroying Sonic. And he's greedy enough to always want more, so we think that he has to do that to be able to rule the world, and not be happy with just being stuck running one tribe. So there'd be a time sink he might not find worth the distraction. Besides, he already has Orbot and Cubot to fan him.